Let's go ahead and kick it off. Getting started. All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. And thank you. And best wishes to all who are working daily to meet the needs of communities, schools, and kids while balancing home lives, family concerns, and caring for those affected by the pandemic. Also, it's Pride Month, so we wish all of our members, guests, community members a very happy Pride. We appreciate all of the contributions of the LGBTQIA+ community towards our larger movement towards equity for all. My name is Jamal, and I'm the Vice Chair of Baltimoreans for Educational Equity. I'm joined by Meredith, who also serves on the B leadership team. Given concerns about COVID, we made decisions to move forward with a hybrid model for this event, meaning that candidates and staff are here in person, and we have an audience of 225 plus education voters joining us via live stream. We're going to get started, and we want to take a minute to familiarize our audience with the tool we'll be using for audience engagement and live streaming. Today, we're using sli.do, and that's sli.do. If you're on your phones, you got that, you can check it out, to crowdsource questions for our candidates. All you need to do is to grab the phone, go to sli.do, type in the event code BEEQUITY, and that's Bequity. I know, fancy. You'll be able to submit your questions on the Q&A screen throughout the forum. Make sure you're upvoting questions, as it helps us prioritize which ones to ask during the Q&A. We'll also have a few polls to gauge the audience responses to our candidate answers. The Ideas tab is where everything else goes. So it's basically our free chat where you can share your thoughts and reflections on the candidate's questions. Let's try it out together with a check-in question. Using 5 words or less, what's the most important problem for our next governor to address? We'll keep the question up while we introduce ourselves. So once again, you all, I'm Jamal, and during the day, I facilitate the role of a licensed financial advisor and the senior board member of the No Leader Project. In my advocacy work, I'm vice chair of the leadership team here with B, Baltimoreans for Educational Equity, and I'm a former educator with city schools. I joined B to advocate for youth rights, and growing up in Baltimore's foster care system, I faced many of the challenges some youth still face today, and I'm a product of a few good people that believed in me. Let's hear from Meredith.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Meredith, and for the past 7 years, I have served as an educator in Baltimore City. I believe that the power to provide for our students lies in community, collaboration, and accountability. And that's why I've organized with B for the past 3 years. A little bit about B. B, or Baltimoreans for Educational Equity, is an alliance of current and former educators, parents, students, and community members who are working together to pursue educational equity and excellence for students in Baltimore City. Our members are leading in the classroom as organizers, policymakers, and elected officials. We want to thank the members of our #EducationCandidates Coalition for making tonight's events possible. The Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, Baltimore Teachers Union, Communities United, Fund for Educational Excellence, Healing City Baltimore, Organizing Black, the Parent and Community Advisory Board, SOMOS, Strong Schools Maryland, and the Teachers Democracy Project, to name a few. Please give it up for these incredible organizations and the pivotal work they do. Thank you to all of you for the work you do to better our city and our state. We also want to thank the 225 plus education voters joining us virtually who are invested in electing a governor who makes education an all-out priority.
Okay. As a collective, we believe that educational equity starts with resources. The governor has the power to determine where education funding falls in the state's budget priorities. As such, our next governor must be invested in and held accountable for the success of all Maryland students. No governor in at least a half century has made K through 12 their top priority. And for the past 8 years, we've had a governor who has neglected city schools. And in this gubernatorial election, there are no incumbents on the ballot for governor. This presents a unique opportunity for change. That's why B developed a candidate questionnaire. We sent it to all gubernatorial candidates across party lines. 10 out of 14 candidates responded. We are disappointed in the candidates who chose not to complete the questionnaire for the Education Candidates Coalition. And we hope that they'll reconsider their priorities and make time for education voters. All candidates who completed our questionnaire were invited to participate in tonight's forum. Thank you to John Barron, Doug Gansler, Ashwani Jain, John King, Tom Perez for being here tonight. The fact that you're here shows that Baltimore and education matters to you. This forum has always, first and foremost, been about the candidates' commitment to education and being accountable to those impacted by the eventual governor's decisions with regard to education. Peter Francho completed the questionnaire and was invited to the forum. His campaign offered to send his running mate in his place. However, given our understanding of the powers of the lieutenant governor and their position within the governor's cabinet, the coalition decided that sending a proxy would set a poor precedent, potentially leading to the eventual governor waylaying their commitment to our organizations and sending a fill-in instead. And instead, Francho's campaign agreed to record and submit video responses to our question. Those responses and videos of the candidates' responses tonight will be posted on our website and social media after the forum. We fully expect that with the support from education voters like you, our audience. Maryland's next governor will be an education governor. Before we begin with our questions, though, we want to make sure that every person in the audience tonight has what they need to be an education voter. We're opening a poll on Slido, so SLID.O. We want to know your plan to vote. If you have not registered to vote or need to update your information on your voter registration and the deadline to do so in Baltimore City, it is the deadline is June 28th. With that, I'll turn it over to Meredith to set up our rules of engagement for tonight's forum.
This gubernatorial forum will explore the candidates' positions on education-related issues. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their responses to all questions. Candidates, when you're giving your answers, you will have a reminder here at 10 seconds, and the mic, both here and on Zoom, will immediately be cut off when you're at time. The moderators will then move on to the next candidate. Rebuttals of material fact are handled by the leadership team of B and not the candidates. We have some pre-scripted questions based on the candidates' responses to the questionnaire, which you can view at home at educationcandidates.com. Participants, please help us prioritize questions for the audience Q&A by taking the time to like the questions most important to you on Slido. Our leadership team will use your input to discern the issues of highest priority and queue them for the candidates. If your question is not asked, we will send them to the candidates after the forum for response. Also at home, please keep an eye on the polls section. We want to know your reactions to the candidates' responses. The Slido Ideas tab is where you'll find the live chat. Feel free to throw your ideas in. And with that, let's jump in. Jamal will be introducing our first question.
Okay. So, as you're all aware, the blueprint for Maryland's future became law in 2021 after the state legislature overrode Governor Hogan's veto of the law. The blueprint offers us just that, a blueprint for a world-class system of public education for all students in Maryland. Over the past 7 years, Governor Hogan consistently imposed obstacles that delayed the implementation of the landmark legislation. This included vetoing the law after its historic passage, vetoing measures to raise revenue, and excluding funds slated to go to some of the state's most underfunded schools in Baltimore City and Prince George's County in the 2023 budget. Meanwhile, a report commissioned by Strong Schools Maryland shows that our state will begin to see a return on our investment a year earlier, with the total fiscal benefits outweighing blueprint costs 3 years earlier than originally projected. As a result, Maryland will graduate more students prepared for high-paying careers or college, attract new and expanding businesses to Maryland, and increase state revenue as a whole. Which leads us to our first question for our candidates. The blueprint contains myriad once-in-a-generation education reforms that improve outcomes for students, educators, families, and communities. In your opinion, what is the blueprint lacking? And how would you fill in those gaps as governor? We'll take responses in alphabetical order. Mr. Byrne, your time starts now.
Thank you. Thanks to B for hosting this event, this very important event on an important topic. I'm John Barron. I'm a former nonprofit executive and Clinton administration official. I founded and ran a nonprofit that worked with the Bush and the Obama administrations to advance, to increase the effectiveness of programs in education and other areas based on evidence about what actually works to improve people's lives. Education is one of the main reasons I got into this race. More than a quarter of middle school students in our state cannot read at a basic level. More than a third can't do basic math. Those numbers are no different than 20 years ago. In Baltimore, more than a quarter of kids in Baltimore never graduate from high school. What's the future for these kids? We're just perpetuating a cycle of poverty. When it comes to the blueprint, I strongly support it, but I want to point out one thing. The last time we did this, 20 years ago with the Thornton Commission, Maryland saw a major rise in education spending during the 2000s, about a 40% increase in spending per pupil. It did not, according to the Kirwan Commission, improve student outcomes. The reason is fairly straightforward. Many education programs, even well-meaning programs, just don't work. They just don't work to improve student outcomes. This time, in implementing the blueprint, the thing we need to focus on, and that I would focus on as governor, is implementing programs that have actually been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. My top priority under blueprint would be to expand high-quality tutoring, for example, to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, because that's been shown to move them up toward grade level early, before the problems get serious in later grades. We'll do it by recruiting people from the community to become tutors.
Okay. Mr. Gansler, your time starts now.
Thank you, and thank you again for having this program. And I do apologize. I too wanted to send my Lieutenant Governor, Candace Hollingsworth, who not only will be the first Black woman Lieutenant Governor in Maryland's history, but she'll be a partner with me in terms of how we govern. So you're right, Jamal, it's undefined, but we're going to define it very differently because she's amazing. But she was not allowed to be here, so I will be here as long as I can, and I have another function. The great thing about the blueprint is that we have a blueprint, and the budget is a moral document, and we need to make sure that funding comes to Baltimore City and Prince George's and around the state. But we've actually already done the hard work, which is to get a blueprint. Now we need to make sure we have a Democrat that's elected. We cannot make the same mistakes. We're looking to right now, some of the establishment leadership here in Baltimore is committing political suicide by trying to make sure we have somebody who cannot win the general election, because we can't put any of the blueprint or any educational reform or help Baltimore City schools without having a Democrat in office, because the blueprint will go into the trash. I started a program here 12 years ago called Charm City Youth Lacrosse, and we have about 500 or 600 kids. It has an educational component to it. I worked here for 8 years as your Attorney General. And it's that kind of thing, exposing it through mentorship and leadership and exposing children outside of the classroom, that I think is one of the things that the blueprint is missing. The other thing that I've been stressing in my campaign is criminal justice. I was a prosecutor for 22 years, federal, state, local, under Eric Holder mostly, but then as the state's attorney and attorney general. And I've been working on driving crime down, but lifting justice up. And we need to make sure we do that in our schools, because you can't learn if you're not safe.
Mr. Jain, your time starts now.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity, for inviting all the candidates as well. My name is Ashwani Jain. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a 32-year-old cancer survivor, a son of immigrants and small business owners, and I'm also a very proud product of Maryland public schools. I've been able to work in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, the Obama White House, and 2 federal agencies. And I am running for governor to make politics inclusive and accessible. The question was, what is the blueprint maybe missing in terms of implementation? It is actually having a governor and executive that prioritizes public education. So for me, my family immigrated to this country with very limited resources. My grandfather was a high school custodian to provide for his family of 7 and achieve his American dream. I went to a Title I elementary school in Wheaton, Montgomery County, which had mold on the ceilings, overcrowded with students, great educators who just didn't have the resources they needed. And years later, when I was 13 years old and in middle school, I was battling cancer. And it was the entire ecosystem of that school. The bus driver, the cafeteria lady, my guidance counselor, my teachers, my substitute teachers, even the building itself felt like my safe place where I felt supported. And so understanding and bringing that perspective to all the policies we have at jainforgovernor.com, and making sure also, just like B does, that every policy that we have on the Jain campaign was written not by consultants or insiders, but in partnership with parents, educators, and students alike. And having the only statewide campaign in the United States that is 100% crowdsourced, I think allows us to bring that accountability and transparency into making sure we're implementing these policies we're going to talk about today in a much more sustainable and equitable manner.
And Mr. King, your time starts now.
Thanks so much. Grateful to be for the opportunity to be here. Look, I was a kid whose life was saved by public schools. That's what led me to become a teacher, a principal, to serve as Secretary of Education for President Obama. I was proud to be a part of the coalition of civil rights groups, the Maryland Alliance for Racial Equity in Education, that worked to help shape the blueprint and to advocate for its passage and the veto override. But I think it's important that we see the blueprint as the floor, not the ceiling, for our investment in our kids. There are a number of things that I would build on top of the blueprint. We should accelerate the increase in teacher salaries and get to a $60,000 starting salary in 2023. We should raise the pay for education support professionals, paraprofessionals. We should invest in universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds throughout the state, as well as universal affordable childcare, birth through 2. We need more investment in school counselors and mental health services. We need to build on top of the blueprint with an effort to make sure we recruit and retain a diverse educator workforce, investing particularly in our HBCUs and our community colleges as a state as pipelines for diverse teachers. We need a statewide tutoring corps to respond to the impact that COVID and the disruptions of COVID have had on our kids, not just academically, but socio-emotionally. And there's an opportunity with a statewide tutoring corps to get mentors for students who will help to support them. And we need a governor who's committed to actually funding the blueprint long-term. And I've been the one candidate willing to talk about revenue long-term. We have to ask the folks who make millions of dollars a year and the large corporations in the state to pay their fair share so that we can fund the blueprint over the long term. And we need capital investment alongside the blueprint to address the issues around air conditioning and heat in the winter that are such an obstacle in the city.
Now.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming. I want to apologize for being slightly late. One of my closest mentors in politics passed away a while ago, and his memorial service was taking place right now. My mother taught me weddings and funerals, don't miss them. And if you got to miss one, miss the wedding, not the funeral. And so I wanted to be there to honor Steve Sachs. So I apologize for being late. Yeah, I'm a proud public school parent. John's wonderful daughters and my kids all went to the same high school, Blair High School. And my running mate, Shannon Sneed, a former Baltimore City Council member, is the remarkable parent of what we call Baby Ray. Ray is a proud Baltimore City public school student now. And the reason I bring that up is because we got skin in the game. I'm a very satisfied customer of the Montgomery County public school system, but I am acutely aware of the fact that there are many people who aren't satisfied customers. And the question presented is, what else do we need to do? And we've all pointed out, we need a governor who's going to actually give a damn about public education. And by the way, we need a governor who actually supports the blueprint. And with all due respect, Peter Prancho doesn't support the blueprint. He said we can't afford it. My position is we can't afford not to do it because we have so much to do. We also have to understand that when the blueprint was being debated, we didn't have the mental health crisis that we have now. And if there were one thing I would focus on immediately, it would be building out a mental health infrastructure so that as we get back to school in the fall, we understand that need because it is critical. Hard to implement the blueprint if we don't have that issue addressed. So thank you so much. I look forward to other questions about it, including how we make sure that individuals with disabilities.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Your responses are on the record, and the recording of this event is available on B's YouTube channel and social media. As we've already stated, Peter Francho submitted the questionnaire and could not be here tonight. His campaign offered to send a lieutenant governor. However, our intent for this forum was to speak directly with the gubernatorial candidates, as we've explained before, and we determined an alternative process. The candidate received the opening question at the start of this event and a specific question related to their responses to our questionnaire. They have a short time window to respond. Those responses, as well as the responses of the candidates presenting this evening, will be posted on social media and the candidate and education candidate website.
As a reminder, we are using Slido, SLI.do, to submit questions. The forum's live chat is in the Ideas tab. We'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&As throughout the event. We will be closing the forum with questions from our virtual audience of education voters who join us virtually tonight. We will uplift the questions with the most likes. So everyone at home, please help out by liking the questions that are most important to you that you'd like to hear answered. For now, we are going to move into questions prepared for each individual candidate. These questions were crafted in response to your questionnaires. Questionnaire responses for each candidate can be found at educationcandidates.com if you'd like to follow along at home. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond without an opportunity to rebut other candidates. We'll start with you, Mr. Perez. Mr. Perez, you ranked ensuring our school boards are at least 50% elected as a low priority of 3 out of 7 on your questionnaire. Of Maryland's 24 school boards, 19 are already fully elected. Up until this year, Baltimore City was the only local education agency in Maryland with a fully appointed school board. This upcoming election will be the first in which Baltimore City residents can vote for 2 out of 9 members of the School Board of Commissioners. Elected school boards are an important democratic pillar as they can be held accountable to the communities they serve. As the state's executive, you have the ability to use your voice and set a precedent for the General Assembly and decision makers. Can you explain why ensuring democratic equity in school board composition is a low priority for you?
You didn't allow us to rank everything high. You said that we had to make choices. And so I had to make choices. I live in a county where everyone's elected. And I love our school board being elected. And I hope that, I actually hope that there's higher representation of elected officials in the city of Baltimore. But what I really think is most important is having, equally important, is having gubernatorial leadership and partnership that hasn't existed over the last 8 years. And we see it time after time. Look at the governor's most recent budget submission during this budget cycle. $140 million shorted. And who got shorted? 2 counties, 2 jurisdictions, Prince George's County, Baltimore City. No coincidence. Where you have highest concentrations of students of color, you see the most serious underrepresentation. I served on the Montgomery County Council. We also had a student board member. And I think that having a student board member is really, really important. And I also made sure, as others have said, that budgets are indeed moral documents. And I'm really proud of the fact that the MCPS was over half of our budget. And what we need to do here moving forward is make sure that we are making these investments in the long haul. Another reason that the Thornton Commission failed is that there wasn't long-term funding. There also wasn't an implementation board. And Larry Hogan has underfunded that implementation board. He slow walked it. Why? Because he's hoping a Republican wins so that they can absolutely undermine the entire Kerwin framework. That's why it's really important that we're having this forum here. And that's why moving forward, I will absolutely be supporting efforts to have elected school boards and to make sure that you all have a voice everywhere, at a state level, at a county level, at every level.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Elected representation on school boards is a high priority issue for our #Education Candidates Coalition. Our members will be following up with you about your response. Jamal?
The next question is for Mr. King. Mr. King, in your questionnaire, you indicate that promoting educational equity and advancing racial justice are your top priorities. Baltimore's youth are full of ideas about how to address historical inequities within the education system and improve their academic experience. How would you approach partnership with Baltimore City youth to elevate their ideas and enact them into policy?
Question. I started out as a high school social studies and civics teacher. So I have a deep belief in the importance of engaging students in the decision-making process about their education. And it should happen at every level. At the district level, I do think student members of the board have been a valuable tool throughout the state to get the voices of young people at the decision-making table with school board members, and they're elected from amongst the students, and that is a very healthy process. But you also need systems to gather students' feedback regularly. You got to reach out to student organizations, got to create vehicles for students at the school building level to give their input and feedback to the district about the budget, about the development of programs. We need not just the schools, but other institutions in the city to do the same thing. The Fund for Educational Excellence showed that the transportation system is a huge challenge for high school students in the city, that so many Baltimore kids are late to high school because of the buses being infrequent and unreliable. Kids often also feel unsafe on the buses, but the MTA has not done a good job gathering feedback from students about their transportation experience. So we need the schools and other institutions in the city to ask students for their input. We need schools to create programming that's responsive to what students are interested in. One of the things I focus on as a high school teacher was trying to find every student's passion. And for some students, that'll be the arts. For other students, that will be STEM subjects. For other students, that will be sports. For other students, that will be early college programs. We have to make sure those kinds of offerings are available to all of our students in every school throughout Baltimore. And we've got to make sure that educators are also at the table for all of these decisions alongside students, continuously giving feedback so the system can continuously improve.
Baltimore's youth are feeling the effects of a rapidly changing world and are proving not only their resilience, but their capacity to lead. Now, more than ever, our youth need a governor that will commit to working with us for a just and thriving Baltimore for all. Meredith?
The next question is for Mr. Jain. Mr. Jain, you shared in your responses that access to healthcare for all Marylanders is a significant priority for your campaign. We know that a lack of access to healthcare is a barrier to student attendance in school, which can impede a student's ability to succeed academically. Healthcare for all is necessary to achieve educational equity. However, you ranked the adoption of a state or local single-payer healthcare option as a low priority. Why are you against a state or local single-payer healthcare option?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So for background, as a cancer survivor myself, as someone who used to be one of the directors of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, as one of the directors of a program run by then Vice President Biden called the Cancer Moonshot, and as someone who right now works every day in a healthcare nonprofit called the National Kidney Foundation, healthcare is not only a personal issue for me, it is also a professional issue for me. I am not against Medicare for all. I just think there are other concrete actions that we can take at a statewide level that are practical, that address short-term as well as long-term solutions. Part of it is making sure we actually have reproductive justice for all of our residents, making sure we're enshrining abortion care, contraceptive care, gender affirmation treatment within our state constitution, making sure that we have free menstrual products in all of our public restrooms, making sure in all of our public health classes at school, we teach about comprehensive sex ed. That goes everything from abstinence to contraceptives, to gender identity, to domestic violence, making sure we also have lactation accommodations in all the workplaces. So that's one part of it, making sure we also invest in more community health clinics, especially for rural communities, which are typically, folks in low-income neighborhoods, people of color, and just folks who don't have access to the proper healthcare resources that they need, making sure they're getting the access that they need. Another part of our policies are making sure we replace SROs in our public schools with more guidance counselors and mental health professionals within our schools, so we actually get to the root causes of what causes a lot of kids and students to actually go through the challenges they've gone through. I grew up, I've been times when I felt suicidal, I felt hopeless, I felt depressed, and having a professional and destigmatizing the conversation around mental health is a really big deal. And it happened even before COVID, right? This is not a new issue, but again, using the platform of governor, using the budget as a priority document to actually enforce these institutions, enforce these policies, and look at it in a sustainable manner is my priority.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. So many factors outside of the classroom influence absenteeism from school, health, transportation, housing, to name a few. We can't expect schools to solve these problems alone. So we really need a governor who will work with school systems to think outside of the classroom to curb absenteeism.
The next question is for Mr. Gansler. Mr. Gansler, in your questionnaire responses, you indicated that your top priority is preventing violence, including increasing school resource officers, SRO, presence in schools. Studies show that the presence of school police increase certain kinds of disciplinary outcomes, including suspension and expulsions, as well as arrests for Black students and students with disabilities. Studies show that SROs increase the rate of chronic absenteeism, a likely important of long-term educational consequences for students. Additionally, data shows that the presence of SROs has increased rather than decreased the odds of firearm-related incidents on campuses. The Blueprint funds services and supports to students to meet their holistic behavioral needs and address other related challenges. The ACLU reports that schools that employ more school-based mental health providers see improved attendance rates, lower rates of suspension, and other disciplinary incidents, expulsion, improved academics, and career preparation, and improved graduation rates. The American School Counselor Association recommends a student-to-counselor ratio of 250 to 1. In Maryland, the average is 369 to 1. Baltimore's ratio comes out to more than 900 students per counselor. The onus is for the governor to put the money where it would count, into the districts that need it most. How will you take measures to correct prior missteps and ensure that adequate and equitable funding is targeted towards personnel that are proven to provide improved health outcomes and safety?
Yeah, and if you look at our website, we have the most, by far, robust mental health proposal in the state, and it calls for exactly that. One licensed mental health professional for every 250 students. And by the way, we need to provide mental health services to our first responders as well, so that we can reduce a lot of the problems that we see. So making sure that all students have access to mental health is critical. In terms of the SROs, school resource officers, you know, I'm the Baltimore candidate. I love this city. I want this city to be safe. I worked here for 8 years every day. I've been coming here for 50 years, and it's not safe. And students are not safe. And students cannot learn in an unsafe environment. And parents do not want to drop their students off to a school where they're in danger. And so while studies may show whatever your studies may show, other studies show and reality shows that having an officer on school campus actually reduces significantly crime at the school, because it also reduces significantly the pipelining of young minority students, Black and brown students, into the criminal justice system. Because what happens in real life is that when there's obviously when there's a gun or something like that, they're going to call the police. But something short of that, old school playground assault of conduct, where teachers will pick up or administrators will pick up the phone and call the police. With you have an SRO, it's handled internally with students, teachers, parents, and that officer who actually knows who's supposed to be on the campus, who's not supposed to be on the campus, and can identify and help work with students to make sure that there's less crime and the students are safe and they can learn. So the Maryland Safe Schools Coalition supports that view. We have them everywhere in the state, and we need to have them in Baltimore City because those students deserve to be safe as well.
Issue is of major concern for our members and the members of the Education Candidate Coalition. We'll be following up with you on that response. Meredith?
The next question is for Mr. Barron. Mr. Barron, in your questionnaire, you prioritized crafting equitable transportation solutions for students as a 6 out of 7. This is especially critical in Baltimore City, where nearly 29,000 students rely on MTA public transit to get to school each day. Our students make up an estimated 18% of MTA's annual ridership. Many travel upwards of an hour each way on unreliable, infrequent transit, resulting in lost learning time when they arrive at school. Over the past year, members of our coalition fought tirelessly to ensure our students continue to have access to free public transit that is safe, accessible, and reliable. This has included regular meetings with the MTA regarding the policy recommendations to combat major challenges that students face during their commutes. As a result, the MTA committed to launch an anti-harassment campaign and develop an MTA Youth Advisory Council. However, we've not seen any progress on either. As the next governor, how would you plan on holding the MTA accountable to their commitments regarding improving transportation for students?
So it's a very question. More than, I think you may have alluded to this, but more than 3/4 of middle and high school students in Baltimore use MTA, use public transit to get to school. And a study done a couple of years ago found that most of them find it very unreliable and are late to school, which impedes education. And I mean, this is sort of a basic issue of government functioning that needs to be fixed. I myself, you know, I've ridden the bus. I'm a big fan of mass transit. I've ridden the bus myself to work from Bethesda to DC for 25 years. That system is about 90% reliable, but that's not good enough because people end up, and in Baltimore, it's much worse, especially for Baltimore students. So I think we need to do two things. Number one, make sure the funding is there. Number two, make sure there is a quality assurance system in place, meaning just to make sure reliability gets up above 90–95%, so that when students have when a bus driver, if it happens to be a bus, if they don't show up, there's somebody who replaces them. But there needs to be a good quality control system in place in addition to the funding. Let me mention one last thing. I believe this is a high priority. It's a foundational piece that's needed in order to have successful education. If kids aren't in the classroom because they're late to school, that's a serious problem. But again, I want to go back to my central theme, which is, and this differentiates me from the other candidates, this is not just about resources. It's about how you spend those resources. My campaign is focused on smart solutions. I mentioned tested and proven solutions like tutoring in the early grades, as I mentioned before. We should also expand career academies in high poverty high schools, because they've been tested and shown to increase long-term workforce earnings by $3,000 per student. I look forward to discussing other
Thank you, Mr. Barron. We'll be certain to follow up with you regarding your response. Next, we'll move into our audience Q&A. Candidates, here are our guidelines. Members of the B leadership team will select audience questions and direct them to candidates to respond in no particular order. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer one question before any candidate gets a second question. Rebuttals of material fact are handled by the B leadership team and not by the candidates. A reminder to the candidates that when you're giving your answers, keep an eye on the time cards. We received a number of questions from our hybrid audience. The questions we're about to ask are ones that were voted most urgent by our audience members. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and then we'll move on to the next candidate. Our first question will be for Mr. Perez, Mr. King, and Mr. Gansler. I'll read it now. Teachers are leaving the workforce in droves after what many have described as their most difficult year teaching yet. How will you work with MSDE and local districts to retain teachers in the workforce? What else can be done to improve teacher working conditions? Mr. Perez, we'll start with you.
That's the ultimate question. Before the pandemic, 42% of teachers were leaving within the first 5 years. Now it's far worse. We have teachers 20 years experience saying, I'm done. And so this is a really, really, really fundamental issue that we have to address. We have to make sure we're paying people and paying them well, because they're saying, you know, the money isn't worth the headache that I'm enduring. We have to, in response to a prior question, I mentioned we have to build a mental health infrastructure within all of the schools to address the fact that this pandemic has wreaked havoc on families, communities. And if we don't have that mental health infrastructure in place, we are not going to be able to fully address the issue. We also need to make sure that, you know, we have a very significant mismatch between the racial demographic profile of our educators and the racial demographic profile of our students. And, you know, that's something that my running mate, Shannon Sneed, is going to be working on with me. She went to UMES undergrad. She got her graduate degree at Morgan, and she taught at Coppin. And these are issues that we have to work on front and center. We need more community schools where we have holistic approaches to learning and addressing all of the students' needs. You know, my kids' elementary school had a school-based health clinic there. That was really, really important. And I think when we allow these localized interventions so that we can address specific issues in specific areas, we can really help change the culture. Because right now, we got to make sure we don't call our teachers union thugs. That's what this governor did. They're not thugs, they're heroes. And we should treat them as such. And as your governor, I will do exactly that.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Mr. King, on to you.
Look, I think it's crucial that we continue to attract and retain a diverse, well-prepared teacher workforce. To get there, we definitely have to raise pay. We need to raise starting salaries. I want to accelerate that to $60,000 by 2023. We got to raise pay across the board, but we really have to address some of the working conditions issues that make it just difficult for people to stay in the classroom. I hear this frustration from teachers all the time. If you're in your classroom in a hat and gloves in the winter because the heat doesn't work, or your school shuts down because it's too hot and there's no air conditioning, that's a working condition issue. And the state has a responsibility. That wouldn't happen in Potomac, but it happens in Baltimore. The state needs to act on that and address those capital deficiencies. It's a working condition issue when there's not enough school counselors in a building. I was talking to a teacher in Prince George's County, a school counselor in Prince George's County, who has 700 families that she's supposed to support single-handedly. That's a working condition issue for her, but it's also a working condition issue for all the other teachers in that building who feel like they can't refer students who need support and families who need support because there isn't adequate investment. So we need to invest in school counselors and mental health services. We need to make sure that we raise pay for paraprofessionals and education support professionals, because everyone who works in schools knows those folks help make the school run. And if we lose those folks because they can't afford to continue to stay in education, schools can't function. So we need to make that investment. We need to make sure that there are adequate supports for kids and families after school, summer. And teachers carry the pain of seeing their students struggling and their students' families struggling. And community schools that are part of the blueprint will help to address that, but we have to invest in the programs, because you have a community schools coordinator, but they have to have programs that they can partner with, and those programs need resources.
And I do apologize. I have to go after this question, but I do look forward to following up with you. And I really just value all of you being here, being online, because Baltimore needs a governor. Baltimore needs a governor that cares about this city, that loves this city, and wants to work with the people here that share that belief that Baltimore can and should realize its promise, and we can work together to do that. School and education is power. So we need to make sure that our teachers are paid. I really don't have much to add to my colleagues who have both thought this through deeply, which is we need to make sure we pay our teachers. We need to make sure they're working in facilities that are fit for Baltimore City and Potomac and Caves Valley and wherever else you want to be, and to make sure that those teachers are safe and that they want to be there because they don't feel like they're going to get involved in a brawl, a fight, shot, and they want to feel safe while in the school and on their way to school. They also need to make sure, we also have to encourage weaning ourselves from standardized tests. Teachers don't need to be teaching to standardized tests. Every one of us older folk up here at least, had a teacher or many teachers that touched us, met us where we were, and really got to our minds and helped us learn not just to take a test, but to want to be educated, to want to read, to see life as a pursuit of learning. And I think that is going to be critical as well. The mental health component, as I mentioned, is going to be critically important both for teachers and for students, to make sure that people feel comfortable and are safe in their schools. And diversity is critical. When I was Attorney General, I wrote a report that I shared with all the other attorneys general in the country regarding diversity in higher education. We need to make sure that happens K through 12 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gansler, for that. Now, the following question comes from Jess Ahart. And these questions are for John Barron and Ashwani Jain. About 29,000 students, or 75% of Baltimore City's public, middle, and high school students rely on public transportation to travel to school. We need the red line to make school choice a reality. Do you support pushing MTA to restart development of the red line east to west light rail? And we'll start with you, Mr. Barron.
Yes, so I strongly support an effective east-west transit solution in Baltimore. Very likely the red line. I'm proud of our congressional delegation for putting that to the top of the federal priority list for study. And based on the results of that study, I think we'll see what comes out of it, but the red line is probably the best option. I've talked about the problems earlier in transit with students. So let me address, take the liberty here of addressing a little bit the question about recruiting and retaining good teachers. In addition to the traditional approaches, which I agree with, of raising teacher pay, making sure they're competitive, we need innovative approaches to bring highly capable people and to test many different innovative methods of bringing capable people into the schools to become good teachers. As I mentioned before, one of my main initiatives is a statewide initiative to provide high quality tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the state, doing it by recruiting an army of people from the community, retirees and recent college graduates, to become tutors for a modest stipend as a public service. That's going to work. That's going to bring kids up toward grade level by third grade. The evidence all says that. It's one of the most effective things we can do. But also, for those tutors who are exceptional, who are very good with the students, both interpersonally and at teaching them and bringing them up toward grade level, there should be a path for them to become regular public school teachers. I mean, so that's one of my top priorities, a tutor to teacher pipeline. We would try it initially as a sizable demonstration project, see if it works, see if these tutors are actually good teachers when they're brought into the schools. If it does, expand it statewide.
Yeah, so back in January of 2021, a year and a half ago, we had a very comprehensive infrastructure plan that included finishing and funding the red line, finishing the purple line, creating a Southern Maryland rapid transit project. One part of my Maryland Now plan is actually to make public transit completely free for every resident. So whether you were a student trying to get to school, someone with a disability, an elder individual, or anyone in between who's just trying to get to and from school, trying to get to and from a healthcare center, to and from work, you are actually able to do so. All these things are an economic argument, it's an educational argument, it's a civil rights argument, it's a human rights argument, as well as a climate change argument. So that's why we've been very steadfast for the last year and a half on these issues. And one of the questions that always I get when I'm talking about these all over the state is, oh, we're not going to have enough money to pay for these. Not only, as you alluded to in the very beginning, these are investments in the residents of Maryland, but we had the money. We had the money when we spent taxpayer dollars to develop the red line. We were getting money from the federal government, but our current governor decided, nope, not for Black and brown neighborhoods. We don't want to do that. We also have a budget surplus. We also voted in 2007 for slots and were promised that that money would go to public schools, but again, had a governor that decided, nope, we're not going to actually invest in public schools. And thankfully, thanks to our Maryland delegates and Maryland senators who override his vetoes all the time, and then he takes the credit for it, we are actually able to make some meaningful progress. And one of the main priorities I would have as governor is making sure we're not leaving people behind. We're doing what works. We're looking at everything in a comprehensive way. And we're not forgetting about the people who are impacted by everything we're talking about out here on stage.
Thank you, Mr. Jain.
Thank you. This next question will be for all candidates, and it's a question of high interest with our education voters. It is, what is your position on police in schools? If you had to decide between funding counselors or school police, one or the other, not both, which would you choose and why? We'll start with Mr. King.
Look, in the question that you posed to Doug Gansler, you laid out the evidence, and I think the evidence is quite clear that the presence of school resource officers increases suspensions, expulsions, arrests, and feeds kids into the school to prison pipeline. We should be investing in counselors, not police officers in schools. We should be investing in mental health services, not more police officers in schools. So this is not just a school issue. This is a community issue as well. Unfortunately, I think throughout this campaign, we've heard from a lot of candidates rhetoric that sounds a lot like the 90s, a lot like the policies of mass incarceration, that the response to kids feeling unsafe, communities feeling unsafe, is just to send more police and make sentences longer. We have 30 years of evidence that that does not work. What we should be doing is investing in mental health services in schools and in the community. We should be investing in addiction treatment in the community, which will benefit our students as their families get the support they need. We should be investing in violence prevention programs like Safe Streets, which help to interrupt cycles of violence. We should be investing in reentry programs. 95% of the people who are incarcerated are coming home. A large share of them are parents of our students. It is better if they're getting education and job training while incarcerated and support finding jobs and housing when they come home. We should be investing in rec centers and summer jobs for every teenager and apprenticeship programs for young people who are disconnected from school and work. Those community investments have to happen alongside the policing in our community, or we won't get to public safety. Within schools, we also need a trauma-informed approach to education. We need teachers and counselors and administrators working together to address the trauma that kids have experienced and to support their success. SROs are not the answer.
Thank you, Mr. King. We'll go to Mr. Perez next.
You asked a question before about school boards, and when I was on the Montgomery County Council, I was very cognizant of our role in budgeting and the school board's role in setting school policy. And I was very cognizant about respecting that. We need more school counselors. John has eloquently outlined the ratios and how bad they are, and we need to make sure we do all that. And as it relates to school resource officers, while my preference would be not to have them, I think we elect school boards in order to help have them make informed choices about what they think is best for their communities. And so I think that that's really, that would be the approach I would take. Just as, remember when Governor Hogan had a one-size-fits-all approach to, we have to start school after Labor Day. That's not what we wanted in my county. And I didn't want that one-size-fits-all approach there. So, I think there's a lot more we can do. And as someone who spent a lot of time on police reform issues in the course of my career, I think we have to understand that if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, pretty soon everything starts looking like a nail. And I've worked very, very hard with communities and successfully with communities to ensure safe communities and to ensure respect for civil rights. It's not an either or. It's a both and then some. And I hate these leaders like Governor Hogan who says, oh, whose side are you on, the police or the community? That's a false choice. And I think we can implement solutions that can enable us, when we're listening to parents, when we're listening to our boards of education, when we're following research and science, I think we can implement solutions that will do exactly that. And as your governor, we are going to expand investments in our counselors, and we are going to make innovative investments in making sure that our kids are indeed safe, working with our boards of education.
I think I said it pretty clearly in one of your first answers about mental health, that I do not believe we need SROs in our public schools, and we should obviously invest in more mental health professionals. And also, if you look at my criminal justice platform, again, that we outlined a year and a half ago, made by residents, not consultants, we look at the entire system comprehensively. So we not only remove and reduce the school to prison pipeline, but actually make sure that communities are safer. That means ending the money bail system, continuing the end of for-profit prison contracts, ending extreme sentences for children, making sure we are treating opioid addiction as an actual public health crisis, not as a crime. And the way to do that is by decriminalizing scheduled drugs like cocaine, heroin, and meth, especially for personal use. And instead of sending you to jail, send you to a local and fully funded rehab center. So again, we get to the root causes of these issues. I'm one of the only candidates, I think, that actually spends 90% of my time in a different county every single day of the week. And when I'm talking with students, with educators, with parents, they want to feel safe, and they understand that we cannot just keep putting Band-Aids or more guns or more police officers in communities to actually address the issue. Because if that was the case, then we would not have as much crime as we do throughout our state and throughout Baltimore. So again, it's being very sincere, being very mindful, and being very sustainable when we're talking about these issues and actually diverting resources so we actually get to the root causes of these problems.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Mr. Barron.
Thank you. So I strongly support increasing funding for counseling, but not a blank check. We can't just spend money on well-intentioned programs and hope they're going to work. That's what we've been doing for decades. We're in the midst of a youth suicide epidemic in the state and in the country. We need to focus on solutions that are tested and shown to work. I'll give you a couple examples. There's a program called Check and Connect, which provides mentoring to high school students who have social and emotional disabilities. It pairs them with an adult who checks in with them every other day. How are you, how are you doing? Do you need additional resources? Connects them to other services, talks with their teachers. It's been shown to reduce the dropout rate for these students by about 25%. It's really an effective program. That's the kind of thing we should be doing, what's tested and shown to work. I want to point out as an example, I keep saying a lot of things don't work when they're actually tested in the real world in a credible study. That is so true, and it really is an understatement. As one example, one of the nation's largest drug abuse prevention programs in middle school is the DARE program, where a police officer comes into the middle school, talks to the kids about drugs and so on. It has been found in multiple studies to have no effect on drug use. Again, it's well-intentioned, seems logical, it doesn't work. There are a lot of programs like this. There are a lot of teacher training programs also that are well-intentioned but don't work. This is not some small detail of government that we should focus on things that work and not. This is the main course. This is the main event. A lot of things don't work. And if we don't focus scarce government resources on programs like Check and Connect and others, and cognitive behavior therapy also in the area of mental health that have been tested and shown to work, we're not going to improve mental health among students in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Our final question comes from, bear with me here, okay? Magdalena Siaganas, Sangas, I apologize. Apologies. How will you ensure a more equitable educational experience for our Black and brown students in Maryland? Please describe specific policies you will support or enact. And we will start with Mr. Jain.
Again, it's a couple things. Number one, making sure that those impacted by these policies actually have a seat at the table, not only during the budget process, not only after the election, but from day one of our operations. I am the only statewide candidate in the United States whose entire campaign is crowdsourced. Every single policy, every single strategy we have on the campaign is literally written, created, and built by residents from every county, every age, every background, as young as middle schoolers, all the way to those that are retired. And so I think it's, again, number one, making sure that people actually have a seat at the table so that I can actually be held accountable. I'm actually accessible. I'm actually transparent. And we're writing policies that can actually be equitable and pass in a sustainable manner. Number two, it's making sure that, as governor, we're prioritizing the budget. So we invest in more low-income neighborhoods. We're making sure that we have collective bargaining rights for all of our educators. We have, like I mentioned earlier, with reproductive justice, we make sure that we have universal pre-K, that we diversify our educator pool by allowing those with associate degrees in the art of teaching to also take the Praxis 1 and 2 certification exams. I think that will also help encourage more diverse individuals to enter the teaching career. I think that's super important, making sure we're moving away from standardized testing to more performance-based testing. We spoke earlier about SROs and mental health professionals. I would also make sure that we're requiring financial literacy credits in order to graduate high school. So again, we're preparing our students to succeed after they graduate high school. And whether you want to attend a community college, a four-year institution, or a trade school, or go right to the workforce, making sure you have those opportunities. We're expanding scholarship programs. We're making sure that we're expanding work study programs. And we're reducing your cost of living in the workforce by having free public transit, by making sure that you have more disposable income, that you have affordable housing, and you actually have equitable and affordable healthcare. All these issues are specific, are tangible, and need to be done not only in the short term, but the long term as well.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. And we'll now go to Mr. Perez.
Civil rights is the unfinished business of America. Civil rights and labor rights have been my life's work. I started my career out at the Department of Justice. I love the name Justice because justice is what we were all about. And I've seen across the country in my work leading the Civil Rights Division, and John's seen similar things in his work in education. We have way too many school systems that are separate and unequal, where the school on one side of the tracks has all these gifted and talented offerings, the school on the other side of the tracks doesn't. And when I think about equity here in Maryland, I think about making sure that zip code never determines destiny. I remember vividly post Freddie Gray, President Obama asked me to lead the federal response to Baltimore. We met at Frederick Douglass High School, and we heard from 4 or 5 students, one of whom said, you know what, I want to be a nurse, but I don't know anyone who's a nurse. Another person said, you know what, I am getting straight A's here, but I don't have the gifted and talented offerings they have at Poly and elsewhere. I'm just as smart as those kids there, but I'm not getting those opportunities. And I met yet another person who said, I have trouble studying at night because I hear gunshots in my neighborhood. Equity in education means we need to address not only what goes on in the school, making sure there are opportunities across every school, not just a select few, to have access, to career opportunities. I'm a big fan of the P-Tech model, which is career academies, and we brought that after Freddie Gray here into Baltimore. I'm a big advocate of making sure that everyone living in this state has access to quality, affordable health insurance, and I have a plan to do that. Why is that relevant? Too many kids of color have serious health disparities because we haven't gotten there yet. And so I would redouble our efforts to make a holistic approach to what's happening, not only in the schools, but what's going on around the school.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. It's going to go to Mr. Barron next.
Okay, you've been very fair about the whole process, I should add. So what I would do, so my whole career has been devoted to addressing social and racial inequities in areas like education and wages and poverty. And that's what my campaign is about. Again, we need to do this with smart spending on programs that have actually been tested and shown to work. That would be my top priority. In regard to your question, programs that have been shown to improve outcomes, in particular for students of color and students from disadvantaged backgrounds. I've given examples. Career academies in high poverty schools have been shown extremely effective in increasing long-term earnings for students, 80 to 90% of whom are students of color. I would also expand, and actually I worked closely with the Obama administration to expand KIPP charter schools. These are public charter schools. They are unionized charter schools that have been found extremely effective. They serve populations that are 90% students of color and mostly low income. They've been shown to raise school-wide reading and math achievement by as much as 10 percentile points. And even through work that some of the evaluation, the studies that my philanthropic team funded to improve long-term outcomes, increasing college attendance many years later. That's something we should expand greatly in the state of Maryland. As one last example, many students, particularly students from disadvantaged backgrounds who are good students in high school, they can go to college, but many of them don't go to college because maybe their parents didn't go to college. None of the other students around them are going to college. There's a program called Bottom Line that pairs them with a mentor who advises them on the college application process, how to choose a college they can afford, how to find financial aid. It's been shown to increase long-term bachelor's degree.
Mr. King.
Given me my whole life has been the role that public schools played for me as a kid. Both my parents were educators. They both passed away when I was little. My mom when I was 8, my dad when I was 12. In the period when it was just my dad and me, my dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. As a high school student, I struggled. I actually got kicked out of high school. First U.S. Secretary of Education, been kicked out of high school. The thing that saved me was teachers, public school teachers, a school counselor, folks who believed in me and gave me a second chance. The kinds of opportunities that public schools gave me should be available to every kid in every community. And to do that, we have to tackle our racial equity gaps as a state, and they are present at every level. Black and Latino students are less likely to have access to quality childcare and pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 experiences. We have to close that gap. Black and Latino students are less likely to be in schools with the resources to have safe facilities, science labs, teachers who are well paid. We have to close that gap. Black and Latino students are less likely to have access to advanced placement courses, early college experiences, career and technical education programs that actually prepare you for good 21st century jobs. We have to close those gaps. Black and Latino students in the state are more likely to be suspended from school and more likely to be in schools that don't have the counselors and mental health services that they should. We have to close those gaps. Black and Latino students are less likely to have the opportunity to pursue a well-rounded education with arts and music and rich after school and summer offerings. We have to close those gaps. And as governor, I will be committed at working every day with educators, with families, with communities to close those gaps. And it will take revenue. And we will have to ask the people who make more than $1 million a year and our largest corporations to pay their fair share, so we have the resources to invest in our kids and in our future. That should be the foundation of any governor's mission, to make sure that we are protecting our students. And
Thank you, Mr. King. And we actually have enough time for one more question here. And with this, we'll start with Mr. Jain. And the question is, what actions related to education will you take in the first 90 days?
All the above. There are not things that need to be done in piecemeal, that are not things we need to do first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. All of these need to be done at the same time. As governor, when I'm appointing the people to run my education departments, when I'm enforcing and creating a budget, all these things need to be at the table and discussed right away. I think one of the reasons why we keep having these same debates with the same people over the same issues for decades is because we have candidates or politicians who fail to actually be sincere about their initiatives, actually fail to address all these issues at the same time, and fail to understand that education addresses every single issue. It's an economic issue. It's a human rights issue. It's a civil rights issue. It's a transportation issue. It's an equity issue. All of these things tying together. And hopefully throughout the course of this evening, I've shown how mindful we are about looking at everything in a sustainable manner, how we're looking at things not just in the short term, but the long term as well. And most importantly, we are actively engaging residents and community members from every community, not just right now, not just after the election, not just during the budget process, but from the first day I launched my campaign a year and a half ago, where every single thing is run in partnership, like organizations like BHAV, right? Where you're bringing all the community members together, creating new policies, creating equitable actions that we can take. We have now done that on this campaign. I think that's why we not only have one of the largest grassroots campaigns in the state without hosting a single fundraiser, without taking a penny from developers, businesses, PACs, or polluters, but we are also primed to not only win a primary and a general, but govern effectively. And that's what residents want. That's what educators and students want, is a governor who's accessible, who's accountable, and who's transparent, so you don't keep getting lied to in every single forum that you have.
Next will be Mr. Perez.
Well, I've had the privilege of working for President Obama as your labor secretary and as the head of the Civil Rights Division, and here in Maryland as the Secretary of Labor. And what I learned about governance is that the most important thing you can do right away is to build a really good team, because the success I've had in governance is about having the right team doing the right things. And we've always been able to recruit incredibly talented, diverse leaders from across the country. And that's one of the most important things we need to do, because if you look at the history of failure in so many contexts, the failures are failures of implementation. The next governor of Maryland is going to have to be the implementer in chief. One of the first things I'm going to do is make sure that the implementation board and the MSDE are on the same page, because I can already see evidence of turf wars, and turf wars bring down educational attainment. Bless you. Bless all of you. I would also say that it's not simply education. Again, as I've said in response to my answers, you know, we have to take a holistic view of this. So I've said early on, I'm going to appoint a climate and resilience coordinator day one, who's going to have a whole of government approach to this, because you know what? Offshore wind is going to be a remarkable employer of the future. And I want to make sure we're investing in career and technical education so that students in Baltimore, students of color in the Baltimore region, are benefiting from these $30 to $40 an hour union jobs. I want to make sure our Department of Health is going to be capable of implementing the plan I've already put out to make Maryland the first state in the country where every resident has access to quality, affordable health insurance. These are the things you need to do. And it's all about making sure you have the right teams in place. And I've prided myself on being able to our motto,
ST, get stuff done.
Thank you, Mr. Perez, for that and also for your blessing. Next is going to go to Mr. Barron.
Thank you. So the reason I'm in this race is because Maryland is stuck when it comes to solving major problems. I mentioned the lack of progress in education over 20 years. Moderate income Marylanders in the state of Maryland, the bottom 40%, have seen stagnant wages since about 1980, while income inequality has soared. And our state has made no progress reducing the rate of poverty in over 30 years. I mean, you can roll the tape back to these forums, the governor's elections of the 1990s. They're all talking about the need to improve education in the state, particularly the schools in Baltimore. All of the people up here, all of the candidates are good people. We share similar goals. They're democratic goals. We want to improve public education. We want to improve wages and the rest. But the other candidates' approach to achieving those goals misses a fundamental point, which is that many programs, no matter how well-meaning, do not work. We've seen that again and again when the results are actually measured. So when they propose to roll out one unproven plan after the next, as we've heard today and throughout the campaign, that's not going to bring progress. That's what we've been doing for decades. I mean, 20 years from now, while our kids look back at this time, say we faced all these persistent problems, stagnant student achievement and poverty and the rest, and say we just kept doing the same thing again and again? Or will they say that at this moment, Maryland did something differently? We pioneered a new governing approach, and this would be the focus of my 90 days, to bring to government the people and the vision to start focusing spending on programs that have been tested and proven to make a big difference in people's lives, so that we can finally move the needle on student achievement and stagnant wages and poverty and racial equity and other problems that are damaging the lives.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. And last but not least, Mr. King.
You know, in that first 90 days, I think that one of the key elements of a governor's strategy will be to work with the General Assembly to get some big things done that have desperately needed leadership. One is to build on top of the blueprint. I talked about accelerating the increase in teacher pay, raising the salaries of paraprofessionals, investing additional resources in mental health services and school counselors. We should work with the General Assembly to get that done. Second, we should work with the General Assembly to commit to universal affordable childcare birth through 5, universal pre-K 3 and 4, and childcare costs for birth to 2 capped at 7% of a family's income. That will be good for our kids' long-term educational success. It'll also be good for our long-term economic success. But then third, and this ties to something that happened today. Today, the Supreme Court announced a decision that will expand voucher programs throughout the country to include religious schools. And to me, the Supreme Court's decision was deeply problematic. Public dollars belong in public schools. We have a voucher program in Maryland called the Boost program. I've been the one candidate to commit clearly to cancel the Boost program. Peter Franchot and Wes Moore have both talked positively about vouchers. I don't think we need a voucher program in the state. I think every dollar we have for public education should be directed to our public schools. I believe that as a lifelong public school educator, as a current public school parent, and as a matter of principle. Public dollars should be helping us build the foundation for the long-term health of our economy and our democracy. And that happens in public schools. The last thing I'll mention quickly, just on transportation, the next governor needs to come in immediately with a plan to make transportation reliable, accessible, and equitable in Baltimore. And that means buses have to be reliable and frequent so that kids can get to school.
All right. Thank you, Mr. King.
Thanks again to everyone who attended this evening and submitted questions. We got these candidates on the record on some of the most important issues and topics we're facing today. And you can count on our #EducationCandidates Coalition to hold them accountable. We know that we need a governor who will show up with meaningful policies that align with the community's concerns, and one that will step up for kids in Baltimore. While B is not endorsing candidates, our candidate questionnaire and dialogue at this forum will result in education badges being awarded, whether the candidate has joined us in person or via video message. As a part of a rigorous process that was based on a rubric designed by our leadership team, candidates will receive a letter grade based on alignment with B member priorities. It's important to note that these are not endorsements, but candidates may choose to use their badges to build themselves as candidates that prioritize education. These badges are a tool to help you decide as a voter which candidates will prioritize education in their policies and planned practices, if and when they reach our state's highest elected office. We encourage you to check out educationcandidates.com to decide how candidate responses align with your values. We're releasing grades via our social media channels now. Please check out B's Facebook and Twitter stream or educationcandidates.com for more information.
Right now, thank you, everyone. Our forum is nearly over, but don't leave yet. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our candidates for taking the time out of their schedules to be with us tonight. We look forward to working with each of you in the future to fight for Maryland students. And shout out to audience members. Your dedication to our students is incredible. We hope tonight has both informed and inspired you to continue the fight for our kids and to vote with them in mind on July 19th. We urge you to share what you've learned today about the candidates' stances on education with your networks. And we urge everyone in your life to be an education voter. We're going to do one more poll tonight, and we want you to know how you'll continue to engage in the fight to eradicate educational inequity. A poll is now live in slide.do, SLI.do. I'm going to keep on enforcing that for you to make that commitment. We want to thank our candidates, John Barron, Doug Gansler, Ashwani Jain, John King, and Tom Perez. We'd also like to thank our esteemed partners and allies, Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, Baltimore Teachers Union, Communities United, Fund for Educational Excellence, Healing City Baltimore, Organizing Black, the Parent and Community Advisory Board, SOMOS, Strong Schools Maryland, and the Teachers Democracy Project, to name a few. Last but not least, we cannot close out this forum without giving a major shout out to Dave Helper, who served on the leadership team over the last few years and whose last meeting as a member of the B leadership team is tonight. We couldn't have had so many wins for kids without his unwavering eye for equity in our city. Dave, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Oh. My God. So, okay. Thank you for your time and for your commitments to our students, community, schools, and city. Good night. Thank you.